For 10 days, I stopped asking how to get rich and started asking a much stranger question. How does a millionaire's brain actually work before money ever enters the picture? That question exposed a mistake I had been making almost every single day without realizing it. And fixing it didn't just change my finances, it changed how I used my time, handled stress, and made decisions. The strange part is, almost none of it had anything to do with money itself. If you've ever felt like you're working constantly, but somehow standing still, watching other people get ahead while you stay exactly where you started, this video is for you. This wasn't a 10-day investing challenge. It wasn't about side hustles, trading apps, or chasing some financial trend online. It was about studying the thinking patterns that quietly separate people who build long-term wealth from people who spend their lives reacting to whatever happens next. Over the next few minutes, you'll see exactly what changed during those 10 days, why most people accidentally train their brain for short-term thinking, and the one shift that rewired how I approach almost every decision now. And the first discovery came faster than I expected. Day 1. I assumed wealth was a money problem. Like most people, I treated income as something to immediately distribute. Paycheck arrives, brain assigns it. Bills, food, subscriptions, something fun. The money felt spent before it even existed, but the people I researched, the quietly wealthy ones, seemed to operate differently. Part of every dollar belonged to a future version of themselves before any spending decision happened. Researchers actually have a name for this: future self-continuity. People who feel emotionally connected to who they'll become tend to make dramatically better long-term choices, because sacrificing today's impulse stops feeling like a loss and starts feeling like a transfer to someone real. The uncomfortable truth hit me immediately. I wasn't behind because I lacked information. I'd read enough books and watched enough videos to know what I was supposed to do. I was behind because my attention was scattered across everything except what mattered, and no amount of information fixes that. And that discovery led straight into day 2. Day 2, I tracked where my focus actually went, not my money. Every phone check, every random tab, every reply to something that wasn't urgent. I wrote it down on a piece of paper next to my laptop. By lunchtime, the page was already full. The results were embarrassing. I wasn't choosing my day. My notifications were choosing it for me, one buzz at a time. Psychologists call this stimulus-driven behavior. Something appears, you react. Message, reaction. Email, reaction. Headline, reaction. Most people never realize how much of their day is spent responding instead of deciding, because each individual reaction feels too small to count. The wealthy thinkers I studied did the opposite. They thought first and reacted second, almost like there was a small delay built into their brain on purpose. That single idea changed how I approached day 3. Day 3. I borrowed one question from Millionaire thinking and used it constantly, almost obsessively, until it became automatic. Is this moving me forward or just keeping me busy? That question was uncomfortable because half the things I considered productive were just maintenance, answering messages, refreshing inboxes, reorganizing files. They felt important. They weren't creating real progress. Activity gives you the feeling of movement. Progress is something else entirely. Once I noticed that gap, I couldn't ignore it anymore, and it pushed me straight into the next realization. Day 4. I started treating attention like money. Most people protect their bank account fiercely, checking balances, comparing rates, guarding every dollar, but let their focus get stolen all day without resistance. Every notification became a withdrawal in my head. Every unnecessary interruption, a withdrawal. Suddenly, I got far more selective about where my mind went. And here's what surprised me. The wealthy people I studied didn't seem to have superhuman willpower. They simply protected their attention better than everyone around them. That single insight carried directly into the most powerful shift of the entire 10 days. Day 5. I started asking, what will this look like in 5 years? Not retirement, not someday, just 5 years out. Close enough to feel real, far enough to reveal what actually matters. A disagreement that felt urgent suddenly looked tiny. A purchase that felt exciting suddenly looked forgettable. Even a skill that felt boring to practice suddenly looked worth the discomfort. This is what researchers call temporal distancing, mentally stepping outside the present moment to judge things more clearly. The present always exaggerates everything. Every annoyance feels bigger. Every temptation feels stronger. Every deadline feels like the only thing in the world. But viewed from 5 years away, most of it loses its grip completely. I started asking this constantly about purchases, arguments, habits, even how I spent my evenings, and the answers were almost always obvious. Day 6. I began thinking like an investor without spending a dollar. Most people assume investing requires money, but the people I studied invested constantly in things that weren't financial. Attention, energy, relationships, skill, reputation, even rest. Started asking a different question before doing anything. Is this consumption or is this investment? Watching random videos, consumption. Learning something useful, investment. Complaining about a problem, consumption. Solving it, investment. Scrolling through someone else's highlight reel, consumption. Building your own, investment. This wasn't about being productive every second of the day. It was about awareness. And once you see that difference clearly, it becomes impossible to unsee in any part of your life. Day 7. I noticed wealthy thinkers don't make more decisions. They make fewer. I used to assume successful people were just naturally sharper decision makers. Now I'm convinced they simply avoid unnecessary decisions altogether. Think about how many tiny choices fill an average day. What to wear, what to eat, when to start working, whether to check your phone, what to reply, what to skip. Each one feels small, but together they create something psychologists call decision fatigue. The more decisions you make, the worse your judgment becomes by the end of the day. That's when impulsive spending happens. That's when procrastination shows up uninvited. That's when good intentions quietly disappear after dinner. So I simplified everything I could. I built default routines for the boring stuff. I made recurring decisions once instead of constantly renegotiating with myself every single morning. The result wasn't more productivity. It was calm. Day 8. I confronted the hidden cost of urgency. Most people live like everything demands an immediate response. Every email feels urgent. Every notification feels urgent. Every request from a coworker or a friend feels like it needs an answer right now. But after watching my own reactions for a week, I realized something surprising. Almost none of it actually was. Most urgency is manufactured by apps, by habits, by expectations we never questioned in the first place. Researchers have found that constant urgency triggers stress responses that shrink your attention and weaken long-term thinking. In other words, urgency makes you think smaller, right when building anything meaningful requires thinking bigger. So I built a simple rule. Whenever something felt urgent, I asked, what happens if I wait 1 hour? Almost every time, nothing happened. The world kept moving. The problem stayed manageable. The panic faded on its own. And I quietly stopped confusing speed with effectiveness. Day 9. Everything started connecting into one sentence. Millionaires don't just think differently about money, they think differently about time. Most people spend time. Wealthy thinkers invest it. Most people react to their schedule. Wealthy thinkers design it in advance. Most people ask, what can I finish today? Wealthy thinkers ask, what system would make this easier forever? That distinction changes everything because systems compound. A simple routine compounds. A useful skill compounds. A strong habit compounds quietly in the background while you're busy living your life. A good relationship compounds, too, in ways that are easy to forget when you're focused on numbers. The longer the experiment ran, the more obvious it became that this kind of thinking isn't really about chasing results. It's about building the conditions that produce results automatically, long after you've stopped thinking about them. Day 10. The experiment ended, and I asked myself honestly, did anything actually change? I didn't become wealthy in 10 days. That was never realistic. And honestly, I never expected it to be. But something else shifted, something quieter. I became less reactive, less impulsive, less rushed. And strangely, those changes felt more valuable than any number in a bank account. I wasted less attention on things that didn't matter. I made fewer decisions I regretted by nightfall. I felt more in control of my days, not because I controlled everything around me, but because I finally controlled myself a little better. And the strangest part, none of it required extraordinary discipline or some dramatic personality change. It just required thinking differently for 10 days in a row and letting that thinking slowly become a habit. So here's the framework I walked away with. 6 filters, nothing complicated. Filter 1, attention. What actually deserves your focus right now? Filter 2, time. Will this matter later or only right now? Filter 3, investment. Does this create value that lasts? Filter 4, simplicity. Can this be decided once instead of constantly? Filter 5, systems. Can this be fixed permanently instead of patched temporarily? Filter 6, patience. Are you willing to let good decisions quietly compound, even when nothing seems to be happening? None of these filters require a big income. None require special connections or rare talent or a finance degree. They're just a different way of thinking. But a different way of thinking eventually becomes a different way of living, and a different way of living eventually produces a completely different result, even if you can't see it forming yet. Before this experiment, I assumed millionaire thinking was mostly about money. After 10 days, I'm convinced it's mostly about attention, time, and the small decisions nobody else notices. Money tends to show up later because wealth usually follows value, value usually follows focus, and focus follows whatever you've quietly trained your mind to do by default, day after day, without even noticing. So if you take one thing from this video, let it be this. Pay attention to the decisions that feel too small to matter, because those are usually the exact decisions shaping where you'll be 5 years from now. If this video gave you even one idea you'll actually use, consider liking it and subscribing to Mental Craft. And if you want to go deeper into this, watch the next video on how to build systems instead of relying on motivation. It connects perfectly with everything we just covered, and it might completely change how you approach your own habits going forward.